Thursday breakfast on Source FM with Ben Makin. Good morning, how are you? Thank you very much indeed for joining me today on Thursday morning on your Source FM breakfast show. As always, this show is brought to you by the University of Exeter. I'm delighted that you could be here because I'm being very, very excited about this particular show. Actually, I've got a load of very, very special guests for you today. Now, this is absolutely fantastic. I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Guang-Zhong, CBE. Professor Yang is the chairman of the UK Robotics and Autonomous Systems Network, and this is actually supported by the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. So, I don't know if you knew about this, but there's an awful lot of robots that are actually in use in society right now. One particular area where this is really, really useful is, of course, in surgery. So, Professor Yang, he's actually the co-founder and the director of the Hamlin Centre, which is a centre well known for robotic surgery at Imperial College London. So he was actually awarded the CBE for his services to biomedical engineering, and he's also well known for his work in medical imaging as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to have Professor Yang on today, talking about robots in the UK. Kind of where are we at? You know, where are we likely to see robots in use in our society? He's also going to talk a little bit about robotic surgery, what that means. If you've never come across that before, it's kind of a minimally intrusive form of surgery. All really fascinating stuff, and I think it kind of blew my mind a bit thinking about the use of robots. You know, right now, this is kind of something which sounds pretty sci-fi, right? But no, it's going on right now. So this is fantastic. We'll hear from Professor Yang a bit later on this morning. We also have the one and only football legend that is John Barnes. John actually joined me live on Source last week, so I'm going to give that interview another play. I don't know if you've seen this. This is the most ridiculous World Cup advert I think I've ever seen. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. It's called Lick a Legend, okay? Actually by Just Eat, the takeaway guys. This is the most hilarious World Cup advert ever. So if you haven't seen that, then, well, you kind of get the idea, okay? Lick a Legend. It basically involves John's face getting licked. So yeah, probably more on that a bit later. John might try and explain the situation. I'm not sure you can really explain that situation, but he'll try at least. And then finally this morning, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Dr. Alex Thornton. Now, Alex is a fantastic scientist here in Cornwall. He heads the Wild Cognition Research Group here at the Centre for Ecology and Conservation down here, the University of Exeter's Cornwall campus. He's going to be talking today all about the fascinating area of science that is comparative cognition, what it means to be intelligent in nature, and some of the research projects that he's currently involved with. And I think you're really going to enjoy both of these, actually. There's two main projects which he's going to be talking to us about today. Number one is the Cornish Jackdaw project, of course, all about jackdaws here in Cornwall, and the cognitive processes that jackdaws have and their behaviour. This is absolutely fantastic. We also touch on the seagulls in St Ives as well, because of course, I don't know if you know, but the seagulls in St Ives you must know, I mean, being in Cornwall, but they're quite violent. So we talk about this. We even managed to fit in the Sarlacc pit from Star Wars somehow. Can't quite remember how we did that one. We also talk about the Cultural Minds project. Now this really is fascinating. So this actually involves children with autism in schools and normally developing children as well, essentially in this research project to try and understand the traits, the things basically that allowed human cumulative culture to evolve. So human cumulative culture is really the thing that sets us apart from the other so-called intelligent beings in nature, if you like, and really this is the ability to keep working on things generation to generation. Things like technology, we can pass on our knowledge from generation to generation, and each subsequent generation we can kind of work on that a bit and improve it a bit. But that's actually all quite a unique process, and basically Alex is interested in trying to work out how that is possible in our society. So this is really, really interesting. So I'm really pleased to have Alex. He will join us last this morning, so from about 8:20, so not long to go, don't worry. So first of all, we have the fantastic Professor Guang-Zhong Yang, CBE, the chairman of the UK Robotics and Autonomous Systems Network.
I'm Professor Yang from Imperial College London, and I spent most of my career working on robotics, and my interest is really that how do we develop robots can perform surgery, help the surgeon to make the surgery better, consistent and safer.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that's going to be of such obvious interest to anyone listening. Actually, I mean, it's a really fascinating area, and I've got this survey data in front of me, of course, which is accompanying, of course, UK Robotics Week 2018, which is just starting. But I thought it would be really nice, first of all, if you don't mind, perhaps just to talk a little bit about the robots that we currently use in society. And I guess one key area of that is, of course, robots used in surgery, which, as you say, has been largely the focus of your career. So I thought it'd be fantastic if we could kind of hear from you a little bit about that. So essentially, we're talking about robot-assisted surgery here, aren't we? Where people might be familiar with that idea of the kind of much less intrusive method of surgery.
Yeah. So in terms of robotics, that everybody's used to robots such as those in home, and for instance, that robot vacuum cleaner as an example.
Yes.
And in fact, there are many robots that are already, either working home or in the city, for instance, that robots used for extreme environments, that for nuclear decommission, search, rescue, and robots for increasingly used for social care for the elderly, robots in use in space, and for urban automation, that a lot of the underground trains that in many countries are being automated, robots in agriculture, infrastructure, manufacturing, many examples. The robots in surgery is very much a more recent affair that it started 25 years ago, that where robots being introduced for minimally invasive surgery. The reason for that is that for keyhole surgery, it's very difficult to operate those instruments. What we call ergonomically, they are challenging, and there are a lot of issues with that. So the robot really simplified this, and to make sure you have magnified motion, magnified vision, remove tremor, and make the maneuver, dexterity, everything to become seamless. So the outcome of that is really to make it to be safer, consistent, and quicker learning curve for the surgeons, and also maintaining that peak performance longer for their career.
Yes, that's fantastic. And in terms of the robotic surgery that you're talking about here, I suppose it sounds like not only is it must be a major challenge for the development of these systems in terms of the robotics itself, but also the imaging, because I'm assuming here that we're referring to, so a surgeon will be essentially controlling this robotic arm, essentially. But I suppose that sounds like there are lots of challenges there, such as and I know that yourself have been really well known for your work in medical imaging, but it sounds like a major imaging challenge as well.
Yeah, imaging is that you can see as the eyes for the robot.
Yes.
To be able to get to the surgical site, and also make sure that any single step we perform is accurate.
Yes.
For cancer surgery, is very important to ensure that the margin is all clear. And the other is that to ensure that we understand the safety and the hazard, because that you want to protect all this vital organ, and also major arteries and nerves and so on. The reason for that is that nowadays surgery is not only about saving people's life, and we need to ensure the surgical procedures are precise.
Yes.
And accurate, and to ensure when patient is discharged that the quality of life is maintained. So that's really the value for that.
Yes.
And make everything to become what we call precision surgery.
Fantastic. And I suppose as well, I was thinking about you mentioned there actually and of course before, I suppose in general, robot use in the UK, of course, there are numerous other examples which you were kind of alluding to at the beginning there, and you're mentioning it, in space and things. And I've actually got one of the UK RAS newsletters in front of me right now, actually, and I was just looking at one of these sections in this, which is really interesting, is the use of robots in extreme working environments, and I suppose space is just one of those examples. Under conditions in which humans just simply can't work, you can automate and use a robot.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know what? I had one thing to tell you, which I think you're going to really like, Professor Yang. Actually, so in a very minor way, I I suppose I do sort of use a robot at work. So we've got a brilliant confocal fluorescence microscope at work, which we just use to image algae with usually. So you can build up 3D images of algae. And in this system, we've got this, essentially, it's the stage of the microscope can be programmed to automatically move across to different regions of your sample. And then the system can autofocus. So in a very minor way, that's a bit like using a robot for research purposes, because basically the system is automatically capturing a bunch of images for me to then look at later. So I thought I'd tell you that. I thought you might like that fact.
No, it's a wonderful, and this is really that, how this type of technology can increase productivity. Yes. And also the last thing you want is that, when you have a confocal microscope, that you have to examine every sub-millimeter of the specimen. And in this case, that, you can let the robot to do all the surveillance and also pick up those interesting areas that for, working with you that to explore further. That's fantastic to hear.
And I suppose thinking about, just for a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, just thinking about, I'm going to turn to this survey that I've got in front of me actually now that, of course, has been released ahead of the UK Robotics Week this year. And it looks like to me one of the kind of major concerns that come out to people, I suppose, if not the only concern, I suppose, about the use of robots in the UK really comes down to worries about employment. So, whether a robot should be used for a particular amount of time, presumably just because then that, negates the need for a human to then do that role. But I suppose really we're talking more here, from what I understand, about robots that really are just essential in those conditions. So, for instance, that example that I gave you about the confocal microscope, and I suppose just the number of hours that would be required for me to do that all manually it would be completely unmanageable. And I suppose in surgery as well, if you can make a robot that makes it far less intrusive, then to me that sounds like it can only be a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. That I think when you talk about the new technologies and so on, that whether it would take over people's job and not, taking a lot of the people, including some of the media, to take a binary approach. To whether it will not, and the reality is not like that.
Yes. And
it will certainly change the structure of our workforce. Certain jobs are repetitive, easily to be automated, and there is a good reason to automate it. Why not we use the robot? Like the example you just mentioned, that it will be much better to use your creativity and your knowledge of examining the sample and also pursue your research agenda rather than spending all your time just manipulating that probe by hand.
Yes.
So this is really the two-way communication that we need to have with people, and also for the younger generation, for their curriculum and so on, prepare for their future as well.
Yes, I think it's fantastic really that this, I suppose even the network itself, I guess, was set up relatively recently, the UK RAS network, of course. And I suppose that in itself just shows you that, of course, there is all this development going on. And basically, what the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council is doing, in a sense, by having this network, to me, is just saying, okay, look, this is going on, and we're going to tell you all about it. Basically, come and learn all about it.
That's right. It's the network is only 3 years in the running, and we are really delighted by the support, not only from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council and also UKRI in general, but also the general public. And in fact, that one of the major missions for the network is to really engage in the STEM activities in schools and so on, to ensure everybody understands what to come. And also this year we have this very interesting space robot challenge for children, and for them to really bring their knowledge and to explore what are the roles that a robot can play, and also that what are the things that we are struggling to resolve. And perhaps they will inspire them to really pursue this, because we need more people going to science and engineering and physical sciences research. And UK is incredibly, strong in terms of creativity, innovation, and it will be great to inspire those talents to come to this area.
Oh, that's fantastic! This sounds extremely positive to me, Professor Yang. I mean, I love the idea of trying to get children engaged in it all as well. In what I assume to a lot of people might sound like a very complex area, but I suppose bringing people into that, I think it's fantastic. So, thinking about any ways that people could get involved with Robotics Week this year. What would you urge them to do? I mean, they should, of course, they could check it out online and things, I'm sure, but are there any kind of particular events that you would like to bring to people's attention, in line with the Robotics Week?
Yeah, so we have over 140 national robotic events across the country, and they are all from major cities, from Edinburgh, Belfast, London, Midlands, Oxford, and Southampton, Plymouth, for example.
Fantastic.
So you can go to our website, ukras.org, ukras.org, and we also have an app that you can download and to check out all the different events that's near to you. And we have, many universities that in the network. We have 28, and also the network is growing. And so check out our website and find the nearest activities near you, and we would love to hear from you.
That's absolutely fantastic. Well, Professor Yang, I really do thank you for coming on the show this morning. Appreciate your time. Absolutely fantastic to have chatted to you. One last thing for you then, if that's okay with you, just a last question. That is, if there is anything at all that you would like to add that I haven't really enabled you to do so through my questions, then please do just add whatever you would like. And also, and this is a bit of a different note now, but I'd really like to give you a song choice, actually. I don't know if you have any kind of favourite songs that I could play for you on the show. And don't worry if you don't.
Now you could be a very difficult one. And,
yes,
I think I leave this choice to you, that what to choose, perhaps a robotic theme for that, and to link the two events together.
I'm sure we'll find something.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time. Goodbye then. Thank you. Well, thank you very much again, Professor Yang. Now, he did make one fatal error there, actually, and that was allowing me to choose this song. I've got to apologise. I mean, this is certainly not a fitting song, really, for someone as professional as Professor Yang, but I hope he forgives me. But I just thought, robotics, this is loosely relevant, isn't it? Sort of. Yeah, I hear you saying yeah. Of course it is, Ben. Of course it is. Yeah. Just quiet. Whatever. Yeah. Okay, well, enjoy. Oh, yes. Oh, that is just such a good song, isn't it? Come on, you've got to think it is. Come on. No, don't shake your head. No, it is. Right, okay, well, the time is here, people. I am delighted now because this is the interview I've been looking forward to. This is the fantastic Dr. Alex Thornton. I'm going to waste no time in getting Alex straight on the show now. Do be looking forward to his song choice, okay? It was a song that I hadn't heard before. I've given it a quick listen. It is fantastic. It's coming on straight after this. So, yeah, just enjoy. Sit back. Enjoy. I've got to tell you, actually, straight off, Alex, I was really excited about this because it just sounds like you're involved with so many really, really awesome projects at the moment with your, of course, heading up the Wild Cognition Research Group. But two of the projects actually really caught my attention. Mm-hmm. I was hoping we'll see how time goes. I don't want to keep for too long, of
Fair
course,
enough.
10 minutes or so. But we'll just see what we've got time to chat about. So I think two of the things which are really, really interesting. First one was the work that you do on humans, actually.
Yeah.
So you're kind of this autism project that you're essentially
that's
running
right.
in collaboration with schools. It's fascinating. I'll let you explain a bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a biologist by training, and I kind of started off working with various species of wild animal. I still do a lot of work on wild animals, especially jackdaws around Cornwall. So in a sense, this is a kind of a bit of an offshoot from my usual research. But I think the interesting thing for me is it kind of illustrates how science is often, it's just these kind of lucky breaks or things that you don't necessarily expect that lead you to new things. So years ago, when I was doing my PhD, I was actually studying meerkats in the Kalahari Desert, and one of the things I was looking at is whether meerkats teach. So at the time there was this idea that humans are the only animals capable of teaching, so where somebody who knows something goes about helping somebody else to learn, so makes an investment in helping somebody else to learn. And people thought that humans can do this because we can think about the minds of others. So I can, for example, recognise that you might be ignorant about something,
yes,
and set about to correct your ignorance. And so because most evidence suggests that most other animals can't do that, they don't really think in terms of one another's minds, there's this idea that animals couldn't teach. But it turns out that meerkats can teach perfectly well, despite not thinking about each other's minds. So they use quite simple mechanisms, but they're really effective. And so the adults in this group teach the pups how to hunt. And so many years down the line, this got me thinking about teaching in humans. And again, there's this idea that because we need to think about the content of other people's minds in humans, then people with autism, who often struggle to put themselves in other people's mental shoes, as it were, they struggle with mentalizing at times, that people with autism should therefore be incapable of teaching, or at least show very impaired abilities to teach. And having worked with the meerkats that teach perfectly fine without thinking about each other's minds, that struck me as kind of unlikely. So we've designed this research project, and really the ultimate aim is to use experiments where we're testing adults and children, typically developing people with autism, to try and uncover the cognitive foundations of human culture. How is it that our culture, unlike the culture of other animals, because other animals do have culture, but our culture has this really interesting phenomenon where it builds up over time. We build on the inventions of previous generations, and so nowadays we have iPhones and computers and rockets that can fly into space, whereas not so long ago in evolutionary history we were banging a couple of rocks together. So we've been looking at what allows us to do this cognitively. So what is it in terms of our thought processes? And so part of this is using experiments with kids with autism to look at how they're able to teach, and how, despite the fact that they may not necessarily be thinking in terms of, well, I know that you don't know something, they nevertheless are able to impart information, and therefore information can spread through groups of autistic children. So I should say this is very much a collaborative thing. So working with Amanda Lucas, who's a postdoc in my group, Amanda's been going around to schools all over Cornwall, doing these fun experiments where we get children in teams to make tools, and then we can look at how those tools improve over time.
That's fascinating. It sounds like it might be super nice for anyone out there who's perhaps listening to this to perhaps look up a bit more information about that as well. And I don't know whether you're still looking for any schools to collaborate with or anything like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're always on the lookout for schools. So if anybody's listening who works in a school or who has kids in schools, particularly we're looking for groups of where we have 8 children with autism in a school. But we're also looking for groups of 8 typically developing kids who don't have autism, so that we can compare how these different groups learn from one another. And I think the really interesting thing there is that we shouldn't really be thinking of these things as deficits necessarily, because the kids with autism have very different cognitive styles, which in some ways are, you might even think of as superior to the ways that kind of typically developing people might.
Yeah, I came across that idea when you were on the Twitter feed for associated with the project. I thought that was extremely fascinating. But that's something that not a lot of people would ever kind of consider. But of course, just because it's I suppose a different way of
it's a different way of processing information. But I think we're often very quick to kind of make judgment that one way is better than the other. It's not better than the other. You might excel in a particular area, somebody else might excel in a different area, and it's the same here. So people with autism are often extremely good at kind of processing fine level information, but might struggle a little bit more with some of the more social aspects of life.
So coming back to some of the kind of social work in animals that you were discussing, and birds in particular, which I know a lot of your work does focus on, I think another one of the really fascinating things that crops up a lot, I suppose, and I suppose even for lay people will probably come across this idea already, but this idea that all the things that kind of traditionally made us think we were very unique as humans, things like our advanced culture and things like that, they're slowly starting to kind of shift, I suppose. And I suppose even you'll probably tell me that even things like corvids are actually very advanced, and that's probably something which would have, I don't know, more than raised a few eyebrows. Probably even a few years ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think if you think of the history of my field, so broadly we call the area of research that I'm involved in comparative cognition, where we're trying to understand the evolution of cognitive abilities across different species, including our own. And really the history of that field is a history of people abandoning former ideas of what makes us special. So if you even go back to the 1960s, there was this idea of man the tool maker. The thing that makes us distinct from other animals is that we make tools. And then Jane Goodall went out to Africa to study the chimpanzees. It turns out chimpanzees routinely use tools. We now know that lots of different animals, including some insects, use tools. And there's a lot of variation there. So lots of animals use tools, but they don't seem to understand how their tools work. But there's some evidence that certain animals, including birds of the crow family that I study, things like New Caledonian crows, actually do understand at least certain aspects of the physics of how their tools work. And there've been a suite of those sorts of things. So tool use is one, teaching is another. Whereas I said, I found that meerkats teach, and we now know there's evidence for teaching in a few species, was thought to be something uniquely human. Other things like understanding the relationships between third parties. So not only do I understand my own relationships, but I might understand that you have a relationship with somebody else. And that again was thought to be something that only humans did. Turns out it's pretty common in various primate species, corvid species. Things like what's called episodic memory, so recalling specific past events, the kind of what, where and when of something that happened to you in the past. We have very good evidence that again, corvids, rats, primates, various other species can do this. So I think it's very easy for us as humans to kind of assume that we're fundamentally different to other animals and kind of take this idea that we're somehow at the pinnacle of evolution, which is obviously nonsensical, because evolution it's not a ladder, it's a branching tree, and so every animal at the end of every branch of that tree is as evolved as any other animal. But I think conversely, it's also sometimes easy to look at an animal and think, well, if I was doing what that animal is doing now, this is how I'd be thinking about it. So to think about it anthropomorphically. And that's also kind of dangerous, because then we assume sometimes that an animal's doing something, very clever or very cognitive, because if we were doing it, we would do it in a cognitive way. But actually they might be using very simple rules, and the meerkats are a nice example of that, where meerkats teach, but they teach using very simple rules.
Thinking about one of your latest papers actually produced with your collaborators, I believe published in Nature, I think, recently. I'm going to use the word intelligence, but of course I'm going to come from a layperson's perspective there, so you might, I know there's a bunch of different kind of definitions I'll no doubt get wrong, but I think if we're thinking about a kind of, if you like, a reason for, or trying to explain why, various animals might have a particular capacity for what we might call intelligence. I guess one of those kind of key ideas, key theories that actually crops up in this paper is this kind of social brain hypothesis, which is basically saying that because we assume that society offers very complex requirements for kind of your understanding. You were using examples there, chatting a little bit about if you're going to teach someone, for example, and various things might require you to have a knowledge of what that person's feeling, how relationships with others and things like that, which of course is all quite a complex social environment. If we're thinking about it in that kind of light, coming back to your kind of autism work, I suppose it's really interesting, and you were saying this about in meerkats as well, to think about that you might be able to act in that same way without having that kind of knowledge, I suppose, and still, as you say, teach and things like that without that kind of complex. Yeah. Because I suppose one of the things is if you kind of approaching, I don't know much about it at all, but if you're kind of approaching that problem as a person outside the field and thinking, okay, so the social brain hypothesis, you've got this complex social network to navigate, but I suppose that kind of requires there to be a complex network in the first place, I suppose. So you kind of want to start, I guess conceptually, you'd want to try and start at a simple social network and build it up, I suppose. Yeah,
that's right. So I think there is this idea out there that there are links between sociality and cognitive evolution or brain evolution. And that's kind of an intuitively appealing idea, because if you think about it, the social world fights back. So, if I'm struggling to find some food, okay, I might use my brain to find the food. But, say that I'm foraging for some fruit or something, it's not going to be taking active steps to avoid me as I'm looking for it. Whereas if I'm, say, trying to deceive you, you don't probably want to be deceived, and so you're going to take steps to avoid being deceived, and you might in turn then try and deceive me. So that might create these arms races between individuals, and people have suggested that these sorts of processes might lead to kind of escalating brain evolution or escalating cognitive evolution. But I think that what we need to be careful of is thinking about, what is the social challenge? Because not all societies are going to be equally challenging. So actually meerkats are a nice example here, where meerkats live essentially in family groups. everybody's quite closely related, and these groups are despotic. It's essentially a dictatorship where you've got a dominant pair, dominant male and female. They rule the roost. They produce almost all the pups. Dominant female doesn't allow anybody else to breed usually, and there's actually no potential for subordinates to challenge the dominant, so they've just got to wait for her to die. And so actually, in a sense, that's quite a simple society, because the conflicts of interest within the group are relatively low. Everybody's family, so if you're a family, then you have shared interests because you have shared genes. And also, there's not much you can do in terms of kind of social strategizing. It's not like you can gang up with other individuals and overthrow the dominant female. It doesn't work. So actually, cognitively speaking, meerkats, although they're extremely social, it's a pretty simple society. Whereas if you think of something like, say, baboons, where you've got these societies that contain multiple males, multiple females who are not related, where you've got dominance hierarchies, different matrilines, so there's a hierarchy within each matriline, each kind of female family group, but then different family groups, one might outrank the other, and these animals form friendships, they form coalitions, they're very strategic in terms of acquiring access to resources, acquiring access to mates, and so there people have used this idea of Machiavellian intelligence, so thinking back to the book The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli in the Renaissance, where he talked about how a ruler needs to use strategy to outwit his opponents. So in a similar way, baboons are using these sorts of strategies, paying attention to who knows who, what do I know about these different individuals, to maneuver myself socially. And so meerkats and baboons are both very social animals, but in the baboon's case, probably solving social problems is a cognitive challenge. In a meerkat's case, it's probably not much of a cognitive challenge. So, we really need to think about, well, what are the problems that each animal needs to solve? And I think, another thing is that we tend to think of social challenges and ecological challenges as being different. But actually, if you're a social animal, you solve ecological problems in a social context. So, if I'm finding food and I see that you've already found some food, then I'm going to come and follow you. And so there's these kind of social elements that feed into the ecological problem of finding food, which all makes it much more complicated than just saying, it's all about sociality or it's all about ecology. It's a mad mix of them all. But that makes it more of a challenge for us, keeps me occupied anyway.
Yeah, I'm certainly more interested in it, right? It sounds like there's not some kind of, I suppose this is always the case, right? Probably obvious to say, but there's not some kind of one-size-fits-all idea that really helps you, sheds light on everything. It's, you've got to, I suppose, as you say, you've got to consider case by case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, people are very drawn to explanations that seem to explain everything. It's all about X, when thinking about human evolution, there have been various ideas that it's all because we had an aquatic phase, or it's all because we invented the use of fire, and whatever it might be. And inventing the use of fire undoubtedly had an influence on aspects of human evolution. But I think we need to be careful going from that to say, yes, this probably did have an influence, to saying this is the explanation. And almost always in science as a whole, where people have arguments between, is it A or is it B, the answer is it's always a bit of both. The classic example of that is nature versus nurture, which is it's a non-argument. It's not nature or nurture. It's a combination of both.
I was also hoping to briefly just mention a little bit, I suppose, and we've already touched on this, I know, as you've been chatting about one of the other projects which you've been involved with, of course, for a few years, and that's the Jackdaw project. I think this might be really interesting to people to hear about, because basically this requires you, doesn't it, to individually recognise a great many birds, because you've got, I think I'm correct in saying, you've still got a load of these birds tagged, like 1,800, I think.
Yeah, we're approaching the 2,000 mark, so there's around 2,000 colour-ringed jackdaws flying around Cornwall. So we put these coloured rings on the birds' legs so that we can recognise them as individuals. They can recognise each other, but to us they all look pretty similar.
Yes.
And so the listeners may well see these birds flying around, especially if you live anywhere near Penryn or Stithians and the surrounding areas. And so if you ever happen to see one of them, I'm always very keen to know where they turn up. Every bird has 4 rings, 2 rings on each leg. So if you happen to see one, drop me a line and say, I had these rings on its left leg, these rings on its right leg, because it's useful to find out where they go. But really the motivation for the Cornish Jackdaw project is using jackdaws as a model system to try and understand the evolution of intelligence. So birds of the crow family generally, and jackdaws are one of them, are known for being very smart. They have their brains are much bigger than you'd expect for a bird of their size. And in laboratory tests of various psychological tests, they tend to do as well, if not better, than primates. So there's this kind of mystery, right? Why are these animals really distantly related to us, but seem to be phenomenally cognitively adept? And because almost all of the work had been done on captive animals, using nice experiments to find out what they can do, we actually know very little about why they can do those things, because to understand that we need to study them in the wild and see what sorts of challenges are they having to overcome in the wild. And so that's what we're doing with the Cornish Jackdaw project, by monitoring these birds over long periods of time, so we know who's laid how many eggs, how many chicks they've had, and so on. We can relate their success as parents to their abilities and various different tasks. And so we're really beginning to unravel what sorts of problems they face. So for jackdaws, one of the biggest problems they face is us, humans. So the biggest threat for probably all the animals in the United Kingdom really are people. And in the jackdaw's case, they're very good at living around people. So whereas populations of lots of birds are declining because we've destroyed the countryside to a large extent and removed places that they might forage or nest, birds of the crow family and these kind of larger brained birds are often quite good at exploiting opportunities that humans create. But at the same time, they're wary of us, quite rightly so. And if you're a jackdaw and you went around being scared of every single person you ever saw, you'd never get anything done. So we found that they discriminate between people. They learn to recognise who's a threat and who's not a threat, and they behave differently according to that. They can learn from one another. So if I found out that you're a threat, for instance, then other birds who I hang out with will also, through my reactions, learn that you're a threat and learn to avoid you. So there's these kind of problems of dealing with dangerous people, but there are also problems that they face in their social lives. So they need to be able to recognise one another. We've got good evidence that they recognise each other by voice, and they can use that ability to recognise each other to govern how they cooperate. So for example, when you might have seen big groups of jackdaws or rooks gathering together to mob predators. There might be a buzzard in the air or a fox on the ground, and somebody raises a call. So somebody shouts an alarm call, and then others come in, and depending on who it was that raised the call in the first place, you get different numbers of birds turning up. So they're kind of using this information. Now, that was someone I know calling. I'm more likely to turn up and help than if it's somebody I don't. So they're, again, kind of behaving strategically based on the social information that they have. And one of the things we're looking at the moment is what are the consequences, basically, of marriage. So jackdaws pair for life, and there's lots of birds that have social partners. So they have a mate, and they mate with that particular individual. But in most cases, they're not very faithful. They sneak off and they mate with other individuals. Jackdaws seem quite unusual in that they're actually faithful to one another. And just as there are challenges in a human marriage, in maintaining a well-functioning human marriage, there may well be challenges in maintaining a well-functioning jackdaw marriage. And so that's something that we're looking at to try and understand, well, what are the sort of challenges that birds face in terms of needing to respond to one another's behaviour, learning how to cooperate, learning how to coordinate with each other, and how does that pay off in terms of being able to raise more kids?
I was thinking of a bit of a funny story, actually, but this is obviously just very anecdotal, but I know that, have you heard about the seagulls in St Ives being notorious for particularly bad at stealing people's ice creams and things? Yeah. I don't know whether this is something that maybe one of the birds perhaps pioneered and then the other birds learned or something in that.
Yeah, it could well be. I mean, I guess that particular case we just don't really have. It'd be really great if we had the information. I think this is the first time it happened, and then we can look at it spreading. But I think it's certainly quite plausible that this is a behaviour that's spread culturally, if you like, by bird individuals learning from one another, because we know now that culture is a really common phenomenon in animal societies. Lots of animals show this ability to learn from each other, and ideas spread, and then you have animals in different areas doing things in a different way because of the things they've learned, in the same way that people in Cornwall do things slightly differently to people in Devon because of what we've learnt from each other.
Yes, exactly. Cream teas is probably
Exactly, it's an archetypal example.
Probably best not ask you which way you have it because
No, I don't want to get death threats.
Yeah, exactly. Cause some violence. No, that's absolutely fascinating. I just think it's amazing to think that anybody out there who perhaps sees a jackdaw and thinks that it is very likely that jackdaw, if you have any kind of interaction with the birds, knows you and will pass on that information to other birds, via their interactions with you.
It may well do. And I think, when I started working on these birds, it really kind of opened my eyes that we often tend to think that in order to see amazing wildlife, you need to, go off to the Serengeti in Africa or something. And, not to say that there isn't amazing wildlife in the Serengeti, of course there is. But I find it really fascinating, actually. You look out your window into your garden, and there are birds pottering about your garden that are some of the most intelligent animals on the face of the planet. And if you spend a bit of time watching them, you'll see that they're really fascinating creatures.
Well, I won't keep you for much longer, Alex. I really do thank you for chatting to me so far. I was just thinking one kind of final point I'd like to mention, I suppose, is coming back to your kind of point about, we were chatting about, this kind of very traditional view that, and you gave numerous reasons why this is, very false to think in this way. But we're thinking that humans are so intelligent and nothing else is. Let's put it kind of simply like that for a moment. But I remember when I think the most surprising thing I ever learned, actually, this was going back to my undergrad. I did a kind of module on comparative cognition, and I think the most surprising thing to me was even something as simple as a larval antlion. So this, very basic. Well, call it basic, but obviously that's not very that's a false way of looking at it as well, I suppose. But to all intents and purposes, it looks like a very basic insect, this larval form, and even this can learn. So it can learn, what if it can associate particular cues, like tapping around its little hole, its pit that it makes. It's quite a nasty little critter, actually. It reminds me of the Sarlacc from Star Wars. If you know what I'm talking about. I mean, even I was amazed that even that learnt.
Absolutely. I mean, even a nematode, which is probably the simplest, one of the simplest kind of multicellular organisms. It has 302 neurons, which is a very, very small number.
Yes.
That can learn perfectly well. Nematodes learn; they show memory, etc. I think, the antlion example is really nice because that's actually one of the invertebrates that uses tools. So they make themselves a little pit, and in larval form they set the bottom of their pit, and an ant walks past and they flick a grain of sand at the ant. The ant falls in the pit and they eat it. So imagine that somebody observed chimpanzees doing that. They have a bunch of chimpanzees. They've made themselves a pit. They sit there in their pit. They wait for a colobus monkey or something to walk past. They chuck a rock at it. It falls in the pit and they eat it. You'd think, wow, that's incredible. Chimpanzees are they're way more intelligent than we thought. But these insects are doing that on a daily basis and we don't give them a second thought. But the interesting thing is how they're doing it. So in a sense, it's kind of a combination of really simple sort of reflexive actions. So if you ever see an antlion pit, you can get a blade of grass and you just tap the edge of the pit with your blade of grass and the ant will start flicking sand. The antlion will start flicking sand. So it's kind of just a stimulus response thing. I feel vibration near my pit, I start flicking sand. But as you say, they can also learn, so they get better through trial and error at doing that and then responding appropriately to the right sorts of movements and vibrations. So it's pretty simple, but there's learning going on as well. They can refine their behaviour with experience.
Well, fantastic. Thanks, Alex, very much. I won't keep you for much longer now. I'll let you go. One final question, and I always like to leave the recorder running for this point, so there's evidence, so you can't back out now. But I'd love to give you a song request.
Oh my goodness me! You're putting me under pressure here. Ooh,
this isn't fair, is it?
No, it's very cool. All right then, I'll tell you what. I want a song by Grimes called "Kill versus Maim."
Fantastic!
It's a great song.
I'll get that on for you. Yeah. Not sure I've heard it, but I'll definitely play it.
Find it. It's
I'll have to give you some feedback.
Yeah. All right then.
Alex, thanks very much indeed.
Okay.
Right, well, very exciting news now because we have the one and only, the legendary John Barnes on the line with us right now. John, how are you doing?
Good morning, I'm doing very well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for this. Great to have you here on the Source FM with us. Now, John, this has got to be, one of the funniest adverts I think I've ever seen World Cup related, actually. This is absolutely fantastic. I think there's no other word for it other than fantastic. I think if people haven't seen it, this is going to sound a little bit odd when we explain what it is, right?
It is. Obviously, people remember the 80s when there's a lot of licking going on of all kinds, then maybe they will understand, but in 2018, it is a little bit strange, yeah.
Well, just for anyone who hasn't seen it, basically it involves it involves your face on a plate and your face being licked in an advert as well. Which is I'm not quite sure. How did you not laugh during the filming of that?
Because I'm a professional. The face on the plate is pretty standard, I suppose. But the advert of my face actually being licked by human beings, as much as it took 5 seconds, the advert to look at, obviously it took about an hour to film.
Oh yes,
licking time and time again, which is a bit strange. But it's a Just Eat campaign for the summer of football, whereby you can download the app and order from your favorite takeaway from the app, and then you got a chance of a plate being delivered. They're giving away hundreds of these free plates with my face on it, and of course the tagline, "You can lick John Barnes' face," so you can lick the plate rather than me. But the advert is them licking me. Then Gianfranco Zola did a plate. There's of a pizza because Italy didn't qualify. There's Putin on a bear and Maradona's Hand of God from 1986. So it's just a fun way of getting people engaged in the football this summer.
Yeah, fantastic. I reckon the reason why you were able to not laugh is probably because you're just so used to so many adoring fans, right? That's got to be it. You've had practice adoring fans.
Practice maybe of the fans cheering me, but not necessarily licking my face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fantastic to have a legend such as yourself on the plate. To be honest, I'm going to be very, very upset if I don't manage to win one of these. Actually, I might have to ask you if you can just send me one.
Well, you look at. I mean, if you can't win it, you got to just order the food, and then it may be delivered. Who knows?
Yeah, that's it.
Keep ordering. Keep ordering. The more you order, the more chance you got of one landing on your doorstep.
And John, the question that I'm sure is on everyone's minds right now, because they know that you're associated with this campaign, is what kind of takeaway is your favourite? Are you a man who enjoys ordering in a cheeky takeaway?
Well, not that you've seen me lately, but if you ever see me, you can know I'm into quantity more than quality. That's my problem. So, from KFC to McDonald's to everybody, I mean, that is my problem. Food is my problem. So I'm hoping to get on a bit of a health kick. But when you got 7 kids, fast food plays a big part in your life, unfortunately.
Well, John, I can guarantee that no one notices that food is a problem for you. I'm not sure that can't be right. I think it's just food. I mean, who doesn't love food? Food's just fantastic.
Food and no exercise. That's the problem. Food's okay if you're doing exercise. So maybe I should just start doing exercise as well as eating food. I'm doing one of the two anyway.
Oh, well, I tell you what, I eat and drink far too much beer, so I'm nursing a bit of a beer belly at the moment. Very, very stubborn one, actually. I've been trying to exercise a little bit, but as anyone who knows me, they probably won't even notice that I've been doing exercise.
Well, keep it up.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to do it. Now, I'm afraid, John, I'm probably the least qualified man in the world to be chatting to you today, as anyone who knows me will know this actually. That I really don't know a whole lot when it comes to football. This is really sad. And I actually asked some of my colleagues. So this chap Dan, who works in the lab with me, who's a big football fan. I asked him to come up with the coolest fact ever, and all he could come up with was, and this is my friend Uli as well came up with the same one. Believe it or not, was Ronaldo's crazy hairstyle 2002. That was their coolest World Cup fact for you today.
That's a fact. Ronaldo had a cool haircut is a fact. That really depends on what you think cool is.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
So, I mean, he had a haircut is a fact, but whether it's cool or rubbish, we don't really know.
It looks like there was just a bit of an accident, I think.
There must be other facts that you know about football. You know that Manchester City won the league. You knew that?
Yeah, well,
that's a fact. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. And I tell you, this is my go-to fact. And my brother James actually was there to witness this, which was great. When Leicester won the league last season, which obviously was a big surprise to everyone. And he was there at the time when this, when it was announced and it was obvious. And he said, the City was just fantastic to be in at that time. I bet that was awesome.
Is he from Leicester? Are you from Leicester?
My parents live here nearby, actually, a little village called Alton.
Is he a Leicester fan?
Well, he is a massive Leicester fan. Now, he went to university in Leicester, so I think he kind of had to be, but then he's really, really, really into it now. He follows them, so it's excellent, isn't it?
I know that's another fact that not many people
know.
No? You're well up to date on football.
Exactly.
You do yourself a disservice by saying you know nothing.
Yeah,
Ronaldo had a haircut. Man City won the league this year, and Leicester once upon a time did win the league.
Yeah, exactly.
Your knowledge of football is immense.
It's not bad, actually, is it? It's not too bad. I tell you what, as well, we actually just had on the show this morning, of course, the song, which you're going to know what song I had on this morning. World in Motion, obviously, with your rap in.
Football. You told me you knew nothing about football. No, that's not football. That's World in Motion, and it's a new order. So.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, I actually only a minute ago had someone texting in saying that you're a true legend, and the rap bit is the best in that.
Well,
so, there you go.
That's the new order, boys.
No, it
was a great song from them, and England in 1990. We got to the World Cup. We kind of jumped on the bandwagon and hijack their song. So when people think it's an England World Cup song, it's a New Order song, and they got all the money for it, so that's why it's their song. So yeah, maybe I got a little bit of kudos for rapping on it, which people may remember.
Oh yes.
They got the Wonga.
Now, it's not very fair, is it? Because you should have definitely got that for doing that performance.
I do it for my art.
And
it's not about the money.
Yeah, it's about the legendary status that you get with now being a rapper as well as a footballer.
Yeah, would I prefer the money and the rights for being number one for like the last 6 months? Of course not.
No,
of course not.
No.
I'll have the glory.
No, absolutely not. No, well, I tell you what, I'm going to have to. I have actually chosen you. It's not this song because I think that will just be too obvious. It's not that song, but I've chosen you a theme tune for when we finish up today. I think you're going to really love it. I'm going to play it in a little bit. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
I think you're going to absolutely love it. So, John, back to the takeaway front then. I just wonder if we could point people in the direction of checking out that the most hilarious video ever.
Well, in terms of trying to get the place, you've got to you can go on the website if you want to see the video. But in terms of trying to get the place, you just got to download the app and order. That's how you get the place. But in terms of looking at the video, I'm not seeing it on the website. But if you go on the www.justeat.co.uk, I'm sure you can see the video. But it's all about trying to get the plate.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. I'm going to end up just ordering. I'll have a takeaway. I'll have a takeaway tonight. I think I'll order 10 just so I get my maximise my chances.
From different restaurants as well. Don't go from the same restaurant.
That's it. Yeah, I'll have a Chinese. I'll have an Indian. I'll have a burger, kebab. I'm going to have a banquet tonight. Then I'll do a bit of exercise. Though, don't worry, we'll be all right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's the number one goal for anybody, really, isn't it? Well, I tell you what, John, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show with us today. I am going to have to play you a little theme tune, but first of all, because obviously you are, being the legend that you are, I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear very briefly from you, because I hear that you're also a sort of one of these psychic fortune tellers, so I was hoping you could tell us whether England will win or not.
No.
No,
no, they won't win, or no, I can't tell you. Because, obviously, once again, very much like your facts, when you talk about psychics, is no a reasonable answer to say that I don't think they will win?
No.
No? You
that's
say
fine.
yes?
Yeah, yes, that's
so
all right.
If I say no, they won't win, and they don't win, does that mean I've got it right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's
there
fine.
you go. I am psychic.
Yeah,
no,
that's
they won't win.
That's
but
it.
They've got a chance. England have got a chance, but they're not the favourites. But they'll do well. I think they'll get to the quarterfinals.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, that's good, and it's reassuring to hear that from a psychic as well. Obviously.
Yeah. I hope I get that wrong because I hope.
You hope to debunk psychics forever as well.
Just myself.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to get your song on now, John. You've waited long enough for this. I'm sorry about this. I've kept you on. Yeah, I've kept you on for too long. Let's just get your song on. Just have a little listen to this. Hope you can hear this coming through your end, actually. Here we go. Now, can you hear this?
Oh, I can hear it.
Do you like this song? This is, in fact, of course, if you're not aware, it's Rod Stewart, the best singer ever. Is it all right?
Well, I love Rod. I prefer Luther Vandross, but Rod.
And it's his greatest song. Greatest song, Do You Think I'm Sexy, as well. It is fantastic. Definitely your theme tune, John. Well, John, thanks so much for your time. I suppose I should be letting you go, shouldn't I? So thanks for chatting to us today on Source.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.